I will. Hello everyone, welcome to the Ben and Jason video cast. I'm Jason.
I'm Ben.
And this week we take a look at the movie 1917, starring Dean Charles Chapman and George McKay.
Right off the bat, what'd you think of it, Jay?
Loved it.
I did too.
And I'm not big into war movies. I mean, Saving Private Ryan was pretty good. But as far as like war and all that, I'm not really into. But this one, no lag time throughout the whole film. It kind of kept on suspense.
It relied on suspense and imagery to carry the film through.
Which it did a fantastic job of doing because, when we were sitting there watching the movie, you've seen me like turn to you and be like, okay, something needs to happen. But this one it flowed good.
And great pacing.
Yes. And the cool thing about it, though, I would say probably more than a little halfway through the movie was a continuous shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No hard cuts, no back and forth.
Yeah.
It was like as if you was following your friends around.
And so the main character, Lance Corporal Blake, and his friend Lance Corporal Sheffield are given a task to deliver a urgent message to a fellow regiment to stand down because they're getting ready to walk into a trap or to be deployed, I guess, into a trap. So the message is to stand down. The difficult thing about this, though, is that they have to go into enemy or through enemy lines. And
where the Germans was prior to them leaving, the Germans had retreated. So they don't know.
They didn't think so at the time. There was a few people who was like they didn't really retreat. But in fact they had retreated. And so once they get through or over their front lines and into enemy territory, that's really kind of the most gruesome part, is because they actually start walking through dead bodies,
horses. Some bodies are just blasted away. One thing, they're having to crawl through the mud and the dirt and all of this, and you could just feel, for me, just feel uncomfortable. And they're probably wool or whatever uniforms. I mean, miserable.
And you had mentioned how they had to set up the scenes that it had to take a certain amount of...
If it took 5 or 10 minutes for Blake to go through the trenches to talk to somebody, they had to build the sets exactly and storyboard it exactly to where, with this continuous shot gimmick, it did take him 10 minutes to get from point A to point B.
And then once they get into or get, I guess, past enemy lines and into the German front lines, they shoot off a flare to let their own regiment know that they're safe. But at one point, they walk into the German bunker, and the Germans have set traps. And an explosion goes off, which has actually triggered a tripwire by a rat running through.
You dirty rat.
Yes. So it comes crumbling down on Sheffield. Blake pulls him out because Blake is new, or at least young, I guess, to war. Yeah. And Sheffield has some experience. So they get through that, and they get to a point where they're watching two friendly aircraft dogfight a German aircraft. German aircraft gets hit, comes crashing, of course, towards them.
Why not?
Stops just short of them. And Blake, being the humanitarian he is,
pulls the pilot out, who's burning and screaming, pulls the German pilot out. They're trying to pat the fire out from his legs. He says he needs water, And at this point, the pilot is looking thankful, looking like he really appreciates it. So Lance Corporal goes over to get the water at this spigot. All of a sudden, he hears, or whatever, that German pilot stabs Blake in the gut.
Yeah.
And of course, Lance Corporal turns around and shoots the German, kills him, but
it was too late then. The damage is done. And at one point, Blake actually looks at Sheffield and says, "Am I dying?"
Yeah.
And Sheffield is honest with him and says, "Yes, I believe you are." So Blake takes a picture out of his pocket, asks Sheffield to deliver it to his brother, who is in that same regiment that they were trying to go to.
Yeah.
So now Sheffield is determined.
Yeah. A more personal reason.
Because he has seen his friend get killed in war, and he wants to deliver not only the message, but also see his brother and deliver the news that Blake didn't make it. I think probably, obviously, when the aircraft has crashed, a whole group of Americans or British comes to.
It's a convoy, and so he asks them if he can ride with them to a certain point. So he does. And while he's in the back of one of these trucks, these soldiers, I don't guess, have been in a battle yet or whatever, and they're laughing. They're impersonating officers and stuff, and Sheffield is sitting there. And he's sad. He just lost his friend, and eventually he doesn't befriend them, but because one of the trucks breaks down and he helps them because he's so determined, he has to get there by a certain time. They sense that he's changed or whatever. They kind of respect him without saying they respect him. So. At one point, though, the convoy, he has to, again, go by himself out and leaves these soldiers.
And all this has been taking place during the daytime, but it's getting ready to go dark, and he gets dropped off, and from there, he's pretty much on his own, and he encounters sniper fire. Actually gets hit, passes out, and that's, I think, probably the first hard cut of the movie. Once he wakes up, he continues. He takes out the sniper.
At this point, was it this where he had to like run because the Germans was kind of entering that area? Was that towards the end, like where he had to run? He's being shot at and everything, and then
that was after that because he actually tries to hide in the basement.
Yeah, where he meets the French woman and
there's a French woman and a baby that she has rescued. It's not her baby, but she is. And Sheffield actually gives her all the supplies that he has, all the food,
milk in the canteen he had.
Yeah, and so that way the baby can at least live.
Yeah,
which I thought was a very kind of a pertinent part in the film, because that still, even though he was trying to survive on his own, he's still looking out for other people. But so he gets through all that. There's a few, I guess, instances where like
he does come into contact with enemy soldiers.
Yeah, and he actually there's one point though where he puts his hand over her mouth and says, "Just be quiet, I won't do anything." And the guy actually turns and says, "Hey, can you help me," or something like that. And
you can trust me.
Yeah.
Hey.
And obviously that's when he has to kill that guy. So
that's when he takes off running.
Yeah. And finally gets to the front lines to his destination. The problem is though, they're in trenches. And the general it's at 300 yards away or 100 yards away or something. Anyway, it's pretty good ways down to get to the general to deliver the message.
And there's so many men packed in these trenches.
Yeah,
you can't just shove and push his way through.
Walk down through there. So he actually has to jump up out of the bunker in enemy fire and run. And
as waves of men are moving forward and artillery shells are landing, he just guns it. And that's when he runs into a soldier, but that was actually part of the scene. That was an extra that he ran into, and it worked out so well they kept that in there.
But it wasn't in the script, though.
Right, yes.
Yeah. And so he finally makes it to the general, delivers the message. The general seems like he's perturbed because he gets messages apparently all the time about either proceed, stand down, stand down. Finally, the general gives the command to stand down,
And it almost, for Sheffield, it's thankless. Because he, you know, it's just a job. But, I mean, after doing all of this work and losing his friend, I would feel like, you know, thanks, or we'll give you a medal, but nothing. But it's a sergeant that thanks him as he's leaving.
And you got to keep in mind, though, that Sheffield has been through not only seeing his friend die, he's been through enemy fire. He's had to jump, like, after the enemy fire to get away from them. He jumped into the river, floated down, about drowned, went through all that, finally met up with the group that led them to the general, and then delivers the message, and the general's like, oh, you know, he's just thankless. So,
whatever.
The next thing, though, that Sheffield wants to do is find Blake's brother, which he does. Finally delivers the photograph and his the wedding ring that Blake had on, and also wants to contact his mother to write her a letter and say what a good person Blake was, and that he felt privileged.
What happened and stuff.
Felt privileged to know him. And one of the really cool scenes, and that was pretty much the end of the film. What I thought kind of brought everything together, though, was at the very start of the movie, Sheffield and Blake are sitting against a tree.
Yeah.
And they're looking out amongst war through, you know, what I guess could be.
Yeah.
At the end of the film, Sheffield, now by himself, after he talks to the brother, walks over, sits down next to the tree, and looks over where he had came from. And I thought it was a good circle, because that's pretty much, you know, you're always looking at where you always are looking at where you came from.
Yeah.
And but overall, I'm not into war movies, but it was a very, very good movie.
I would give it 4 stars. Really enjoyed it. I love anything that has to do with World War I and history movies as well. So I really enjoyed it. I give it a 4 because I do enjoy war films, and I do, I guess you could say, enjoy the action and more gunplay and all that, more grit. But that's the only thing, and shallow as it is, that's the only thing for me that doesn't get it a 5. How about you, Jay?
Same. I mean, I would give it 4 stars. There was no lag time. Again, cinematography. The thing is, with period pieces, like, there was a few things I had read where it's like the plane didn't have rivets, it should have been smooth, and it's like, who's going into this much detail or whatever?
We certainly are not.
Obviously. But we've got crap to do here. But overall, though, the cinematography, the location, everything like that really brought it together, and you felt like you were actually watching almost a documentary on World War I, or at least the story. And at the end of the film, it actually pops up that it thanks somebody who had given them stories of World War I. So I guess it was probably loosely based on a true story, but I mean, otherwise, I would probably give it a 5, but totally 4 stars. I'd highly recommend it, especially if you're into war movies.
Yeah. Cool. So, check it out, 1917. You want to swing us away?
Yes. So, let us know what you think of the film. Be sure to leave a comment, like, and subscribe.
Hit that bell icon.
That way you'll be notified when we review a movie.
Content.
Until next time, I'm Jason.
I'm Ben.
Well, I'll see you later. And our mics are not plugged up.